Welcome back, MTG Joe here. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. So I do welcome feedback if you want this series to continue in the future. But what I thought I'd do is there's a lot of deck lists that go on across the internet every week for standard, for various tournaments, RCQs, the arena ladder. So what I thought I'd do is every week kind of curate 3 to 5 unique, heavily modified, kind of off the beaten trail decks that are doing well in either like a tournament setting, they spiked like an RCQ, or have been putting up like 5-0s on MTGO, kind of bring out that spice or variation. As you can see on the screen right now, a lot of standards dominated by like Dimir midrange, Gruul aggro, Golgari midrange, Esper Pixie, the Xur decks, mono red. Like looking through the data dumps every week, it's basically 80% these decks. So let me know what you think about this if you'd like to see this going on every week. We'll use this as a complement to the other deck videos that we do in terms of like the metagame breakdown, the win rates, everything like that. But trying out something different as we kind of lead into the new set. So we're going to look at 5 decks today. Some are completely new, some are modifications and kind of changes or things we haven't seen that often that are doing well that you might want to look at. We're going to start off. So Alaric CA won an RCQ with Simic Merfolk. So we're going to take a look at their deck list here. And it is kind of an infinite combo deck. So we've had iterations of this people have been trying in the past, but we're getting more of a density of cards that make it work. How the combo works, you have Deep Root Pilgrimage. So whenever one or more non-token merfolks you control become tapped, you create a 1/1 merfolk with hexproof. So basically what you would do is there's kind of 2 ways to do this. You have the Forensic Researcher. So you can have 2 copies of Forensic Researcher and they just keep targeting each other to tap and untap. You could do it at your opponent's end step. Basically make an infinitely large army and then you smack them in the face on your turn with just a huge army. You can also do it by getting one of them under Agatha's Soul Cauldron. With a counter on any of your creatures, they all gain that ability of Forensic Researcher. So this allows any of your merfolks to basically perform this ability and then kind of going with that same effect. The rest of the deck is kind of just a Simic Merfolk deck. So Synod Scout helps you hit lands, puts card into your graveyards, naturally could put a counter on itself to enable the combo. Jadelight Splunker, just kind of a bigger version of the Synod Scout with a mana sink. The Mistway Spy, just a merfolk flyer, you could throw counters on it. Mockingbird copies stuff, so it's kind of a 5th copy of the Researcher. Hexcatcher is another ability that you could put underneath of the Cauldron to turn any of your merfolks into basically 4 spikes for non-creature spells. Kiora, draw, discard, helps you fall into the combo, like just kind of dig into it. And then Kiora, Enduring Curiosity for card draw. You have Flood Maw as an effect here, and then you can also use Schooner as another way. So each instance of crew, you can crew multiple times, and each instance would trigger the Deeproot Pilgrimage. In your sideboard, pick your poison, just flexible removal, Flood Pits, Drowners, like tempo elements. You can tap down some big creatures, Paw Patch, just more effects. Things like Temporary Lockdown could get you anything that kind of disrupts your combo pieces. Sentinel, the Nameless City, just kind of scales bigger than some of the mono red decks. Kind of plays into if there's a lot of cheap removal, Pyroclasm style effects, you can bring this in. Tashanas for activated ability, and then versus the aggressive decks, you have Dissection Tools. So really, really sweet list here. Pretty budget if you have the Soul Cauldrons and the Caverns, like 260 of the 400 is just those cards there, which is kind of wild, and like Hedge Mazes. So Ratto Sacrifice is a deck we've seen in some iteration before. It hasn't done like consistently well, but there was a player, Colombo Matteo Nicolo, who got 2nd place at an RCQ 50 person in Milan, and some interesting card choices in this deck here. Stalactite Stalker is a card that hasn't really seen much play. There was a minute where it was seen like legacy play. When you descend, so permanents in your graveyard, you get to put a counter on it, and then you can sacrifice it and be kind of removal there. A lot of ways to kind of incidentally put cards into your graveyard permanents, whether it be sacrifice, stuff of that nature. Spiteful Hexmage gives you a rural token that can be sacrificed. FOMO, draw, discard, and Delirium. Clockwork Percussionist is card advantage. Braids can sack any of these effects and kind of drain out your opponent, give you some card advantage. You have Forge that can give you fodder for all these effects, Torch and Final Vengeance as flexible 1 mana removal. Interesting card here, Corpse of the Lost. Gives you Skeleton, and then at the beginning of your end step, if you descended, you can return it to your hand, pay a life, and then you get it again. So you can just keep casting it, making skeletons on each turn, kind of go from that route. Nowhere to Run, Hopeless Nightmare, and then Disturbing Mirth just as another card draw engine. So a lot of incidental card draw engines in this Rakdos shell. Pyroclasm for the aggressive go wide decks, Go for the Throat, Feed the Swarm is kind of removal options, Ghost Vacuum. For Graveyard Hate, Duress, another copy of Nowhere to Run, and then an interesting one here, Darkstar Augur. So 3 mana with an Offspring ability for 1, and then it's basically like a Dark Confidant. Beginning your upkeep, you reveal top card of your library, put it into your hand, you lose life equal to its mana. So in the Grandier matchups, it gives you some card advantage in that respect. All right, this next one, you're going to say, Joe, this is Esper Pixie, but it's kind of not Esper Pixie. It's got concepts of it, but this list in varied fashions has shown up in a bunch of MTGO leagues, and some folks have been playing it. It's almost like an eggs-ish. I don't even want to say eggs because eggs is usually Storm, but it's got elements of the Pixie deck, but you're not necessarily using the Fear or the Pixie to pick up stuff. What you're doing is you have things like Prophetic Prism that draws you a card, can filter your mana. Clayfire Bricks helps you hit lands. Tithing Blade is removal. Wishclaw Talisman in here can help you find stuff. This was reprinted in Foundations. Thunder Trap Trainer helps you draw. But the core of this deck here is a little interesting. So you get all these permanents into play, Hopeless Nightmare, and then you're playing Temporary Lockdown. So what you're doing is basically getting all these ETB style effects, then you play Temporary Lockdown, it exiles them all, and then you can basically bounce the Temporary Lockdown with the This Town Ain't Big Enough to your hand, or you can basically use Scroll Shift, which is an interesting card. 3 mana, exile to 1 artifact, creature, enchantment, then return to the battlefield under its owner's control, draw a card. So what happens, Temporary Lockdown leaves the battlefield and then comes back into play. So you get all those ETBs, it all goes away against like the aggressive decks. You also have an incidental sweeper for all their mice and stuff like that, which is a cool kind of strategy there. So your win condition is basically just keep repeatedly Hopeless Nightmaring your opponent, 2 life, 2 life, 2 life. You also have the flip side of Clayfire Bricks, which makes some tokens, and then the Tithing Blade, which flip side, which can also drain your opponent there. So technically Thunder Trap Trainer is a creature that can legally attack your opponent. So some interesting kind of lines with this deck here. Sideboard, you don't have green cards, but or green lands, but you have the Baloth for kind of the bounce mirrors, Beza for the aggressive decks, Lorn, Artifact, Enchantment Hate. You do have the Pixies in the sideboard as another option to kind of pick up stuff and grind your matchups. Authority for the aggressive decks, removal with Tithing Blade and Witch's Vanity. And then Jace, the Perfected Mind for the big mana decks. So against things like Zur, they're going to gain a lot more life than you can probably deal damage. Then it's mono white tokens, same idea, so you just mill them out instead. Another deck that's had some iterations but kind of fell off or evolved. This one's an interesting one with some of the card choices that I want to highlight. So this went 5-0 in a league by Trophez. So the original kind of iteration of this Caretaker's Talent deck was Urbrass Forge and Talent, but this one here has got some interesting choices. Sarah Paragon, with all the discard, this lets you just rebuy some of those effects, which is really cool. You have your whole kind of removal package, same as that, but a couple interesting ones. Karn Living Legacy. Can we say this is worse than 2 mana Tybalt as the worst planeswalker ever? Maybe, we'll see. But the plus basically draws you a card every turn off of Caretaker's Talent. You have some artifacts, but it's not necessarily the most that you're kind of feeding into it. So you can only use this to cast. This mana can't be used to cast non-artifact spells. I believe the Power Stones may be able to power your activated abilities as a lands, but I'm not 100% sure on that. It's been a while since I played with Power Stones. The -1, you can pay some mana, dig through your deck or dig through that many cards to get some card advantage. Then you have an emblem. Whenever you tap an artifact, deals 1 damage to any target. You also have Quintorius Canned, another Cascade kind of discover effect. And then whenever you cast spells from exile, you get to do some damage. So some interesting planeswalkers included here, not the ones you normally see. A couple Bezas, Overlords, the usual kind of Gauntlet, full Fountain Port, full Restless Biovac mixed into there. Sideboard, you also have like the Stone Brain package to just edict certain cards. Like Zur, you can take out any kind of win condition pieces in kind of the grindier decks. Against mono red and stuff, you're probably not going to have this in, but Graveyard Hate, various options. Final Showdown is another sweeper. Metropolis Reformer, so you have hexproof, so burn doesn't hit you. Whenever it's dealt damage, you gain that much life. Litho Barrage for the blue-white decks, and then Destroy Evil, like we mentioned. Then the last one, this one got top 8 in an RCQ by Alex Bowman, and this is Rakdos Harmless Offering Demonic Pact. So how it basically works, you have Demonic Pact, you get some of the benefit initially, and then the last clause is you lose the game. Well, you're not actually going to lose the game with this deck. What you're going to do is you are going to get this Harmless Offering and say, opponent, why don't you hold this and lose the game? So you have 2 Harmless Offerings and then 4 Beseech the Mirrors that can also help you find it. You have some Preachers, Shieldred, a bunch of different removal options, a bunch of discard mixed in. The Disturbing Mirth can sack in a pinch your Demonic Pacts, the Tiny Bones, or like any of these kind of enchantment-based removals to draw you some more cards. All these enchantments are also fodder for the Beseech the Mirror that also works in that case. Sideboard just has more removal. Day of Judgment is an interesting one. Again, a card that can be found off Beseech the Mirror. That's an unconditional sweeper, something that mono black lacks at the 4 mana slot. More kind of different hand hates as relevant. Feed the Swarm for enchantment or just catch all removal. Graveyard Hate, cheap sweepers, render inert against Archfiend decks, which isn't too popular at this point. And then the End as a general catch-all kind of surgical extraction style removal spell. That's it for the week. Let me know what you think of this. Obviously, the more unique decks like the Merfolk one, we'll try to highlight those. Some are going to be iterations or decks that haven't been as frequent. I'll try each week to week. Hopefully some weeks we get more than 5, some it might be 3, but the intent is to kind of bring out a bunch of different deck options. Let me know what you think in the comments. We'll catch you next time. Thanks for watching.